In our last episode, we asked a provocative question. Is South Africa using the Russian playbook to silently take over Lesotho? You can find the link in the description. You probably thought we'd hit peak uncomfortable. You probably thought we'd stirred enough pots to last a lifetime. But oh no. After our last episode, the comment section didn't just light up. It exploded. The overwhelming sentiment and the chilling, repetitive chorus that echoed was something like this. And if you thought our previous conversation was uncomfortable, strap in. Because today, we tackle a question that's been whispered in every bar, every marketplace, and every dust-choked shebeen across Lesotho. A question that might even land me in a jail cell. What if Lesotho became South Africa's 10th province? It sounds like madness, but in a nation choking on its own despair, sometimes madness is the only relief. I'm your host, Tladiphile Bita, and welcome to In Perspective, where every issue deserves a closer look. To truly understand the current dilemma, we must first grasp the historical crucible that forged Lesotho's unique position. For those who glance at a map and wonder, why is there a whole country in the middle of South Africa? The answer lies in a story of fierce resistance and strategic survival. In 1871, Lesotho, then known as Basotho land, was annexed into the Cape Colony, a move driven by colonial ambitions and a scramble for land and resources. But this was no simple acquisition. Basotho people, under the visionary leadership of King Mushasha I, had already established a formidable reputation for resilience. In 1884, due to fierce internal resistance and administrative complexities, the British reversed their decision, returning Basotho land to separate status under the direct British rule. This was not a gift, it was an acknowledgement of an intractable people. Later in 1910, as the Union of South Africa was formed, colonial administrators once again pushed hard to include Lesotho, along with Botswana and now Eswatini, into this white-dominated union. The British, however, hesitated. A complex interplay of political and deeply ingrained racial considerations and the desire to avoid inheriting a large unified black population directly into the union ultimately kept us out. It was a pragmatic decision that meant a continued, precarious independence for Lesotho. In 1966, Lesotho finally gained full independence from Britain. The timing was less about a nation fully prepared for its own destiny and more about Britain washing its hands clean of colonial responsibilities. By then, South Africa was already deep in the throes of a brutal apartheid system. Since independence, Lesotho's very own survival has often felt like dancing on the edge of South Africa's table scraps. Our fate is historically, economically, and geographically intertwined with our giant neighbor, for better or for worse. It is this profound intertwining, coupled with our own internal struggles, that bring us to the agonizing question of today. Lesotho's national mood? It's not merely strained, it's poisoned with frustration. Our youth attend and crowd dialogue halls like an insurgency, hands stretched out and demanding access to jobs as if our government had them neatly tucked away in a dusty drawer waiting to hand them out. In June 2025, our Prime Minister, God bless his soul, declared youth unemployment a state of emergency. For many years, this felt like a solution and more of a standing ovation for stating the bleeding obvious. The majority of our youth have simply stopped looking for jobs. The sheer weight of hopelessness is crushing, and thousands line up for army recruitment not out of patriotism, but because, in a land stripped bare of opportunity, there's simply nowhere else to turn. Our universities, once beacons of progress, produce graduates who end up back home disillusioned, depressed, and clutching degrees that feel increasingly useless in a land that offers no professional future. It is in this state of despair that the fantasy lingers, whispered like a forbidden truth. Maybe we'd have access to better jobs if we were part of South Africa. But let's face the facts about this merger idea. Lesotho, with a population of 2.2 million people, is much smaller than South Africa's 60 million. By population alone, Lesotho would be amongst the smallest provinces, and even the Free State, with a much larger, is only 3 million. Gauteng alone has 15 million, KwaZulu-Natal 12.4 million, and the Western Cape and Eastern Cape each have over 7 million. Our capital, Maseru, has between 340 to 460,000 residents, which is much smaller than Johannesburg's 5.5 million or Tshwane's 4 million. Lesotho's national budget is 24 billion rands and covers all national expenditure from healthcare and education to infrastructure. In contrast, the Western Cape province in South Africa has an annual budget of over 80 billion rand, supporting 7.6 million people and a complex economy. Lesotho, with a population of 2.2 million, often relies on international assistance for essential projects. Lesotho's per capita income is around 1,200 US dollars, significantly lower than South Africa's 6,000. Development indicators show a large gap, and in rural areas, only 38% of Basotho households have access to electricity compared to South Africa. Lesotho's roads are limited and in poor conditions, clinics are sparse and under-resourced, and water infrastructure remains inadequate in many areas. By most social and economic measures, Lesotho faces profound development challenges, placing it significantly behind South Africa's less developed provinces. A merger would not simply mean integration, it would represent a major financial and development commitment for South Africa, and inheriting a struggling economy and significant social needs. Lesotho would gain access to a larger system, yes, but would also inherit existing challenges within the system. Infrastructure and service delivery present a similar, sobering picture. South African provinces themselves grapple with maintaining extensive railway networks and addressing widespread road deterioration. Now imagine integrating Lesotho's treacherous mountain passes and remote, under-resourced rural clinics into an already strained system. The Western Cape government alone allocated over 30 billion rand over 3 years just to maintain its road and infrastructure, a figure Lesotho's entire national budget can barely even touch. If Lesotho were to join South Africa, would local clinics suddenly flourish? Or would Basotho find themselves navigating an even more overburdened health system? A merger would largely create one more province with significant developmental needs, seeking resources within an already stretched larger system. It would be a profound undertaking. So, if we go all in on this annexation fantasy, what exactly would South Africa be inheriting? South Africa's journey since its democratic transition has been significant, yet it continues to contend with substantial challenges. South Africa still struggles with energy security, and after a brief period of relief, load shedding has made a dramatic comeback like a stubborn STI that can't be treated. Lesotho's hope of stable affordable bulk electricity from South Africa hinges on addressing these existing energy realities. And it extends beyond power. South African municipalities face significant governance and financial challenges. The Auditor General has consistently highlighted a shocking state of municipal finances, with only 15% of municipalities operating without major financial irregularities. Out of the 8 major metropolitan areas, which house nearly half of South Africa's population, only Cape Town achieved a clean audit last year. This means major centers like Johannesburg and Durban are managing significant financial and service delivery hurdles. Now imagine Lesotho's various districts being absorbed into this framework. It would mean exacerbating a system already grappling with profound challenges. Crime and corruption also represent significant challenges within South Africa. The murder rate remains among the world's highest. Carjackings, gang-related crime, and kidnappings are unfortunate realities that frequent headlines. With the relatively peaceful Basotho countryside, where a thief might still bother to steal chickens, suddenly become part of a larger South African crime scene, encountering more organized and violent criminal patterns in certain areas. Consider the notorious illegal mining violence linked to the Zamazama operations. Absorption into a larger and more complex South African criminal landscape could carelessly fuel and proliferate the very illegal mining operations and associated violence that South Africa itself struggles to contain, further destabilizing communities under a new and less accountable system. Annexing Lesotho would strain South Africa's already strained social welfare system. A large portion of Lesotho's population lives below the poverty line, and extending South Africa's comprehensive social grant program to over 2.2 million new citizens would mean a massive and immediate increase in expenditure. This would add billions of rands annually to an already burdened national budget. Beyond these critical issues, Lesotho grapples with the highest HIV prevalence rate in the world, with approximately 23% of our adult population living with HIV. Is South Africa, with its own significant healthcare demands and budget constraints, truly be prepared to inherit a formidable, ongoing challenge of managing the world's highest HIV burden as well? South Africa has enough problems of its own, and it can't easily solve Lesotho's problems by annexing it in a display of power and influence or a promise for a better future. Given the complexities and daunting realities of outright absorption, what if the answer isn't Basotho giving up Lesotho? What if there's an alternative route that allows for a greater stability and development without sacrificing the very essence of nationhood, like maybe a semi-autonomous region or state model within a more robust federal South Africa? As we conclude this episode, I ask you with utmost sincerity to reflect deeply. Would becoming a South African province genuinely fix Lesotho's roads when South Africa itself battles with crumbling infrastructure in its own provinces? Would it truly save our youth from hopelessness when South Africa's youth unemployment figure dwarfs our own? Or would Lesotho simply become Free State 2.0, another forgotten, perhaps even looted province, perpetually blamed for its rural challenges while resources flow elsewhere? Let me leave you with a sobering question. Should we end Lesotho to solve its problems? This answer must come from Basotho, with their eyes open to the harsh realities and a clear, terrifying awareness that unchecked despair can tragically define a nation's fate. And to you, our South African viewers, we also pose a question for your own reflection. As your nation faces internal challenges, are you ready to inherit Lesotho's deep-seated problems if it becomes your 10th province? This is In Perspective. If you found today's video insightful, please give it a like, subscribe, and share to keep the conversation going. And remember to stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful. See you in the next one.